The price of a woman in Harrow Gulch, Montana, in the winter of 1887 was cheaper than a good pair of boots. Theo Crane found that out on the worst Friday of his life. He hadn't gone into town looking for trouble. He'd come for flour, a spool of wire, and maybe a bottle of something strong enough to make the wind sound less like grief. The supply run was supposed to take an hour. He was supposed to be back up the mountain before the temperature dropped below killing. He was almost at the door when the shouting started. It came from the back corner of Dawson's General, the section that doubled as a trading floor on market nights, where men sold pelts and horses and debts they couldn't pay. Theo didn't turn around. He set his flour sack on the counter, dug into his coat for the coin purse, and kept his eyes forward, fixed on a water-stained calendar nailed above the register. December 3rd, 1887. He could have walked out. He almost did. $15 for the lot of her. 15 cash, and I'll throw in the blanket. Theo's coin purse hit the counter without him meaning to drop it. The man doing the selling was named Burl Hennessy. Theo knew him by sight and by reputation, a trapper who'd spent the last decade burning through claims, wives, and goodwill in roughly equal measure. He had the voice of a man who had learned that volume substituted for authority. He was standing in a cleared ring of men, most of them drunk, some of them not, holding a length of rope. The other end of the rope was tied around the wrists of a young woman. She was maybe 22, 23 at most. Dark red hair matted with ice and road grime, braided back in a style that had stopped being tidy about 3 days ago. She wore a man's coat, 2 sizes, too large, a canvas skirt caked with dried mud at the hem, and on her feet, Theo registered this last, and felt something in his gut go perfectly cold. She wore strips of sacking cloth, wound and tied with bootlace. No shoes. It was 11 degrees outside. He'd checked the thermometer on the post before coming in. The woman was not crying. That was the first thing that struck him. She was not cowering, or struggling, or pleading with any of the men ringing her. She was simply standing, her bound wrists held out in front of her at a precise, deliberate angle, as if she had calculated the exact posture least likely to earn her a blow. Her eyes moved in slow, methodical arcs around the room, not panicked, assessing. Theodric Crane was 38 years old. He had fought in 2 range wars and buried a wife. He had spent the last 6 years on a mountain by deliberate choice because he had decided, after sufficient evidence, that the company of human beings did him no measurable good. He was a man who fed his horses before he fed himself, and who hadn't spoken more than 40 words at a stretch to anyone in longer than he could recall. He counted the money in his coat pocket without taking it out. He knew what was there. He always knew. $30. Every cent of it spoken for. A new anvil bolt, wire for the pasture fence, salt for the winter smoking. $30 between him and a season of going without. He bought her for 18. He didn't negotiate. He didn't make a speech. He walked through the ring of men, set the money on the upended crate Burl was using as a podium, and pulled out the short skinning knife at his hip. He cut the rope at her wrists. The men around him were quiet in the unreadable way of men deciding whether to be angry or impressed. Theo didn't give them time to decide. He picked up his flour sack from the counter, turned and walked toward the door. He heard her follow. He hadn't told her to. She came anyway. The cold outside was a wall. Theo's breath turned to fog the instant they cleared the doorway. Behind him, he heard her sharp intake of air as the full Montana winter hit the exposed parts of her neck, her wrists, the cloth-wrapped feet that were already darkening in the snow. His mule, a gray and contrary animal named Patience, was hitched at the post. Theo untied her, turned, and looked at the woman properly for the first time. She was watching his hands, not his face, his hands. He felt the observation land somewhere behind his sternum and stay there. "Can you ride?" he asked. "Yes." "Get up, then." He helped her onto Patience, then walked. He always walked the last 2 miles up the mountain anyway. The trail above the tree line was too iced for a loaded mule to carry double. He didn't explain this. He just started moving, and she followed on the mule without asking where they were going. The trail climbed through black spruce and lodgepole pine, the snow coming up past Theo's knees in the deep places. The wind was sharp and directional, funneling down the ravine like something intentional. Theo tucked his chin and pushed through it. Beside him, Patience plodded with her ear out back. On her back, the woman gripped the saddle horn with both hands. Her wrists were still rope-marked, the skin abraded raw, and did not say a word for the entire hour it took to reach the cabin. The cabin was his wife's design and his construction, and he had never once managed to look at it without feeling both things at once. He kicked the door open, got the lantern lit, and started the stove before he said anything else to her. "Sit anywhere that isn't the floor," he told her, because the floor was where he piled the things he hadn't put away yet. "There's venison on the back shelf. Dried. You can eat it." He heard the scrape of a chair. He didn't look. He built up the stove, filled the kettle, and hung his coat by the door. He was reaching for the coffee tin when he heard it, not words exactly. More like a sound organized into words, quiet, flat, almost careful. "Do you want me in the bed or on the floor?" Theo set the coffee tin down. He turned around. She was sitting in the chair nearest the stove, the dried venison untouched in her hands, her bound raw wrists resting in her lap. She was looking at him with an expression that contained no fear, no hope, no particular feeling that he could identify. Just a steady, practical calm. The same calculation she'd been doing back in Dawson's, figuring the odds. "Which do you prefer?" she said, and her voice didn't waver even slightly. "With the fire or without? I only ask because the dark," a pause brief and controlled. "I have trouble with the dark." The kettle began to hiss on the stove. The sound was ordinary and obscene. Theo Crane had not wept since the summer of 1881, when they lowered his wife into the ground on a hillside that overlooked the river. He had learned in the years since to identify the physical precursor to it. A tightening across the bridge of his nose, a sudden impossible fullness behind his eyes, and to route it somewhere else before it arrived. He routed it now, hard, into the muscles of his jaw. "You have the wrong idea," he said. His voice came out lower than he intended. "About why you're here." She didn't blink. She was waiting for the version of this statement she recognized. "I don't want anything from you." He stopped, started again, aware of how inadequate his language was for this particular thing. "I'm not going to touch you. You're here because the alternative was leaving you in a rope, in a room full of drunk men, and I couldn't." He stopped again. "I just couldn't." She looked at him for a long time. "The bed or the floor," she repeated, and this time, beneath the flatness of it, he heard what the question actually was. "Is this real, or do I have to keep preparing for what's coming?" "You take the bed," he said. "I sleep by the fire. Door's got a bar. Iron bracket, right side. You can lock it from inside." She looked at the door. She looked at him. "Okay," she said. And then, after a moment, "My name is Rowena, Theo." He made coffee. He set a cup on the table for her. He didn't look at her while she drank it, because he had the distinct and unnerving sense that being watched was something she needed to recover from. He rolled out his bedroll near the stove and lay down on the hardwood, listening to the wind work at the shutters and the small contained sounds of someone trying not to take too much space. He heard the creak of the rope mattress. He heard her shift once, twice, settling. He didn't hear the iron bar drop into the door bracket. He lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, thinking, in the spring, she'll go. Thinking, this changes nothing. A fire popped. The wind pushed against the cabin walls and found no way in. Theo closed his eyes and told himself he was prepared for anything. He was not prepared for the morning. He woke to the smell of coffee already made. Rowena was at the stove, her dark red braid over one shoulder, wearing his spare wool shirt over her canvas skirt. The shirt came to her knees. She had bound her feet again in the cloth strips. He'd have to do something about that, he thought, and then realized he was already thinking about what he could do about it, which was not nothing. He had his wife's winter boots in the chest beneath the window. He hadn't been able to give them away. "Coffee's on," she said, without turning around. "I can see that. I didn't know if you had a preference for how it was made black. However it comes." He got up, drank the coffee, standing at the table while she moved around the stove with the careful efficiency of someone accustomed to working in small spaces, staying out of the way. She'd already swept the floor and laid the kindling for the next fire. "You don't have to do all that," he said. "I know how to make myself useful. That's not what Theo stopped. "Set down the cup. I'm not keeping a tally, Rowena." She looked at him over her shoulder. Something in her face shifted, small, private. almost like she was filing information into a category she didn't entirely trust yet, but was keeping open. I know how to be idle too, she said. I've just forgotten the feeling. He found the boots that afternoon. He set them on the table without saying anything, and when she came in from filling the water bucket, she stopped and looked at them for a long moment, he said. Because she'd want to know she died 6 years ago. They ought to fit better than the cloth. Rowena sat down and tried them on. They fit. She sat there with her hands in her lap, wearing his dead wife's boots, and she didn't say anything for a while. I'm sorry about your wife, she finally said. I'm sorry about whatever happened to you before Dawson's. She laced the boots. Her fingers were deft and practiced. That's a long list, she said. You don't have to tell me any of it. I know. She finished the second boot. I might, eventually. I don't know yet. That's fine, he said. I'm not going anywhere. December passed. January sealed the mountain shut under 3 feet of new snow. The world outside the cabin was white silence and wind, and inside it was the slow, cautious construction of something Theo couldn't name. Rowena learned where everything was kept and where he preferred not to have things moved. He learned that she hummed to herself when she was thinking, a low, tuneless sound, and that she ate like someone who had spent time not being certain of the next meal and had never entirely gotten over it. He split twice as much wood as he needed, because the cold still seemed to affect her at a cellular level, some memory in the body deeper than the mind. She never asked him to, he just did it. He started sleeping in the actual bed in mid-January, not beside her but nearby. On the far side, a matter of simple geometry. The floor was drafty, and his shoulder had been giving him trouble. She said nothing about it. He said nothing about it. They slept in the same bed with 3 feet of cold air between them and did not discuss it. And it was, Theo thought, the least fraught arrangement of his life in recent memory. He understood now why she'd been so precise about it at the start. The dark was a problem for her. She slept better with the fire banked high, with light under the door. He made sure of it, without making a point of making sure of it. He was starting to know how she worked. That was the thing that caught him entirely off guard. Not the feeling itself, which arrived gradually and without announcement, but the recognition of it. He had spent 6 years not knowing how anyone worked. He had organized his life around that not knowing. Now he found himself thinking, she doesn't like the sound of the wind in the east-facing wall. She likes her coffee with the grounds run twice. She's left-handed, but she eats with her right because someone at some point hit her for the other one. That last one he figured out in February, watching her switch hands on the spoon when he came through the door, a reflex so old it probably predated conscious thought. He didn't say anything about it. He just moved the spoon holder to the left side of the stove, casual, without fanfare, so it was closer to the hand she actually preferred. She noticed. He could tell she noticed. She didn't say a word about it either. They existed in this language that was mostly not words, mostly small adjustments and quiet acknowledgments. The way people do when they are being careful of something they don't want to break. February ended, and March began with ice storms that howled for 9 days straight and drove them inside to the same fire, the same lamplight, the same book that Theo had read 11 times and was reading aloud now, because it turned out Rowena had never learned to read, and would not admit it outright, but would look at the page when he held the book and track his finger with her eyes. He read slower when she was watching. He did not point that out either. He was in the middle of a passage, something about rivers, the particular geography of a place he'd never seen, when he became aware that she'd gone still in a way that was different from her ordinary stillness. He looked up. She was watching his face. "What?" he said. "Nothing." But her expression had the same quality it had had in Dawson's, that careful calculation, except now she was calculating something that seemed, against all apparent odds, to be landing on a result she hadn't expected. "Rowena, I thought I had the measure of you," she said. "Back in the beginning. I had you filed under a certain category of man." She stopped. "I was wrong. Most people are wrong about me in the other direction," he said. "What direction? Think I'm friendlier than I am." She looked at him with a rare and unhurried amusement. "Well," she said, "you aren't friendly, no, but you're—" She paused, searching for the word with the precision of someone who had found that imprecision cost her. Good, she finally said. Simple. Direct. Like the word surprised her on its way out. Theo looked back at the page. Don't go canonizing me, he said. I'm just a man who doesn't like to see things suffer. I know, she said. That's not nothing. The trouble came, as trouble on the frontier reliably did, on a morning that started perfectly ordinary. Theo was in the lean-to, checking Patience's left foreleg, which had been off since the last ice storm. The mule was tolerating his examination with the resignation of an animal that had learned cooperation was faster than resistance. Theo was pressing along the tendon, feeling for heat, when he heard the sound of horses laboring up the trail below the cabin. Two of them, heavy-footed in deep snow. He straightened, set the mule's leg down, walked to the lean-to door and looked out. Burl Hennessy was coming up. He had a man with him. Thick-necked, expressionless, carrying a rifle across his saddlebow with the casual familiarity of someone who used it for more than game. Theo didn't know him by name, but he knew the type, hired on for the kind of work you needed someone else to own. Burl pulled up in the clearing in front of the cabin, his horse blowing great clouds of steam. Crane, he called out. Come out where I can see you. Theo walked out of the lean-to. He moved without hurrying, but he moved. His revolver was inside on the peg by the door. He had the skinning knife, same as before. He thought about the distance to the cabin door. Hennessy, he said. I've been thinking about our transaction. Burl's expression was the particular arrangement of features men use when they want to seem reasonable while making an unreasonable request. Thinking I undersold. Thing is, she's got skills I couldn't rightly advertise in a public venue. Cooking and such. We don't have a transaction anymore, Theo said. We had one. It's done. See, I don't see it that way. $18. Burl made a dismissive gesture with one gloved hand. Doesn't buy permanent. I was in distress. Selling in distress, that's not a binding price. The man with the rifle shifted his grip slightly. Not a threat? Not yet, just a reminder. Turn around, Theo said. Ride back down. I'd like to hear that from the girl herself. The cabin door opened. Theo didn't turn around. He kept his eyes on Burl and the man with the rifle. He heard her boots on the porch boards, the confident, specific sound of someone who had decided something. Go inside, he said, low and even. He came up my mountain, Rowena said behind him. I'll hear what he has to say. The man with the rifle looked past Theo's shoulder at her, and something in his expression shifted, a recalculation. Theo caught it. He filed it. Come on back down with us, Burl said to her, his voice taking on a false warmth like a house, with a fire in one room and ice in all the others. No hard feelings about the rope. That was the circumstance talking. Was it, she said. Crane here can't give you what we can. He's a mountain man. Lives like an animal. We've got a proper. I'm going to stop you, Rowena said. Before you describe whatever it is you're offering as proper. The man with the rifle moved the weapon from the saddlebow to vertical. The motion was unhurried and explicit. This doesn't have to be difficult, the man said. Theo's hand went for the skinning knife. Too slow. The rifleman's barrel came up, and in the fraction of a second before the calculation finished, Rowena moved. Above. She stepped off the porch past Theo's left shoulder, and she was carrying the revolver from the peg by the door in a two-handed grip, her feet planted wide in the snow, and she had it leveled on the rifleman with a steadiness that suggested she had done something like this before, or had thought about doing something like this before so many times that the real thing felt like memory. Put it down, she said. The man held his rifle at vertical for one long second. Then he looked at her face. He set it across the saddlebow again. Burl, she said. She didn't look at him, kept her eyes on the rifleman. You sold me for $18 in front of 40 witnesses. That's done. If I ever see you on this mountain again, I will not consider it a social call. Burl Hennessy sat on his horse and looked at her, and for the first time in his life he appeared to be genuinely uncertain what move came next. He turned his horse around. The rifleman followed. Theo stood in the clearing and watched them go until the sound of hooves was swallowed by the trees. Then he turned around. Rowena was still standing in the snow with the revolver at her side, watching the tree line. The wind lifted a loose strand of her hair across her cheek. Where did you learn to do that? He asked. My father kept a gun, she said. It was the only useful thing he left me. She turned to go back inside. Stopped. Yeah. She looked at him over her shoulder. and it was not the face she'd worn in Dawson's, not the calculating survival arithmetic face, not the careful don't show him anything face. It was just her face in the late winter light against the snow. "You came out to face them alone," she said. "It wasn't anything. You didn't wake me up. You just—" She paused. "Came out." He didn't have an answer for that. He'd just done it because it was what you did. Because you put yourself between the thing that might hurt and the thing that was worth protecting. "I'm not a man who finds people worth protecting, generally," he said. "Turns out I found one." She held his gaze for a moment. Then she went inside, and he followed, and she made coffee without being asked, and he drank it, and neither of them said anything else for a long time. The snow melted through April in stages, retreating up the mountain like a tide going out, exposing the raw red earth beneath, the flattened grass, the first impossible green pushing up at the mud line along the creek. By May, the trail down to town was passable again. Theo didn't mention it. She didn't mention it either. He noticed she had started keeping a kitchen garden plot at the south-facing wall, turning the soil with the same particular attention she brought to everything, deliberate, careful, like she was making something she intended to be here to see through. On the first genuinely warm morning, Theo sat on the porch with his coffee and watched her work the garden bed, and he thought, she could have left in April. The trail's been clear enough for 2 weeks, he thought. I'm not going to say that. He thought, I'm not going to say a lot of things, and it might be that she already knows them anyway. Rowena sat back on her heels and looked at what she was growing, looked up at the mountain above them, the long white peaks still carrying their winter crowns against the clear May sky. I need to learn to read properly, she said, without turning around. I know, Theo said. Will you teach me? He looked at his coffee cup. He looked at the sky. He looked at the garden she was putting in the ground with her hands. Start this afternoon, he said, after lunch. She nodded once, like a woman who had made a decision and found it satisfactory, and went back to her planting. Behind her, Theo sat on the porch step and felt the particular quality of warmth that comes in May in Montana, when the cold has finally relented and the world smells like mud and pine and starting over. He thought about a man who'd gone into town for flour and wire, and come home with something he hadn't known he was missing. He thought it was possible that the mountain that had been a refuge had become a home, and that there was a difference, and that the difference was her. He didn't say any of that. He finished his coffee. He went inside to find the book.